Today, we are going to talk with a friend of mine, a 911 dispatcher with 23 years experience in the business. She used to dispatch for me back in the day. We are going to talk about all things in relation to calling 911 for emergency, what to do when you can't speak but there is an emergency, what to do when you call 911 by accident, and we're going to talk about what is a life and death emergency versus what you think is a problem for your day and not an actual emergency, what to do. Today on Safe Realty with me, your host, Shannon Cutler, I'm on a mission to educate my listeners so that they don't become the next true crime news headline. As a former police officer with 18 years of investigative experience and now a real estate agent, I guide realtors on how to handle their own security in vulnerable situations and develop best safe business practices. If you enjoy learning tools to improve your safety, I'm going to ask you to please follow this podcast, and if you would, leave a review. Share it with your friends, and even better, play this episode at your next office meeting. Let's get as many people with their ears on this information as we possibly can. I'm so thrilled that you're joining me today for this wonderful conversation with my friend Carolyn, 911 dispatcher, working up in the northern reaches of Canada. Things may be a little different in the US, but not that much different. And she does explain that to me off camera at the end. So I am thrilled for you to listen to all the things 911 dispatching. I can't wait for you to experience some of the interesting things that she's experienced with us as we go through this conversation today. So welcome to Safe Realty. So I guess, Miss Lovely Carolyn, why don't you just start by just telling me about your job as a 911 operator, and you can, give as much detail as you want about it, and we'll just go from there.
Okay. I think it's going on 23 years service as a 911 operator, dispatcher for a police agency. I've worked in several places throughout Canada, including BC, Alberta, Nunavut, Northwest Territories, and the Yukon. So it's a great job, never the same day twice, ever, which is lovely.
So where has been your favorite place to work and all that?
I don't know if I have a favorite. They've all given wonderful challenges. My favorite place to live is the Northwest Territories, followed very closely by the island, especially when we're sitting in minus 40 and lower for the last little while. But all of the spots I've worked have offered really unique challenges. So I've enjoyed them all. So I don't know if I have a favorite.
That's fair. I could see that. I could see that. Having worked up, not as far north as you, but having worked up north before and then been on the island, there's so many, they're just so different. It's hard to compare them, really.
Yeah, completely different.
So there's a few things. So I teach the realtor safety course here, and this podcast is on Safe Realty, directed mostly at realtors. However, I'm hoping that, a lot of the information I give can be really used by anybody in the general public. And I know some of the people I'm speaking to, like yourself, this information that you're giving could really apply to anybody. So I do get the question a lot about like what to do when somebody calls 911. So when they call 911 and there's an actual emergency, it's not the mad at the waiter because they lost their reservations at the restaurant or something stupid. I've heard some bad ones over the years. But when someone calls 911, you pick up on the other line. What should they do?
So just to start right from the beginning, what happens when you call 911? Thankfully, most people will never have to call 911. They're not going to use the service. And all the experience they have with it is what they've seen on TV or movies. And that's not how it works. So just to start right from the beginning, most of the places I've worked in across Canada have gone away from the police agencies answering the initial call to a centralized call center. So it's really important to understand when you phone 911, you're not talking necessarily to the agency that can help you. You are talking to a giant massive call center that is going to downstream your call. So just to go over what that looks like, you're going to phone 911, someone's going to answer and say, 911, police, fire, or ambulance. Now, it is really important that you just answer that question. They don't need the whole story. They can't help you beyond transferring your call to the agency that can't help you. So you're going to say, in this case, we're going to use police. You're going to say police. They're going to ask for where you're at. They're not looking necessarily for an address or a specific location. They're looking for your jurisdiction. So just if you're in Sydney or you're in Saanich or wherever, just give them something quick so they can transfer you to the right agency that can help you, because they are going to downstream to whichever area you're calling about. So 911, police, fire, ambulance, police, they're going to get where you're located, and then they might confirm your phone number, even though they'll have it on call display. We don't trust that because that technology sometimes fails. Okay. So once you get transferred to police, sometimes it'll be an open line and you'll hear them do that transfer. Sometimes it won't. Just wait patiently until you hear a voice asking you what your emergency is. Okay. Now, this feels like it takes a lifetime. It doesn't. It's probably about 30 seconds, but you're panicked, you're scared. It needs to go faster. Just trust the process. It goes quick. It just doesn't feel like it. So police are going to pick up, and the first thing they're going to say is something like, police, where is your emergency? Not what, but where. And it's so important that you are able at this point to give a specific location, because if we can't find you, we can't help you. So if you can give an address, if you can give a street name, all of that is great. If you can't or you don't know where you are, say that. We are trained to get the information we need to figure out where you're at. Again, on TV and in the movies, they have all these screens and your location pops up with a little stick pin and a map. That doesn't really happen. The technology is not there yet. We can get up here, it's called a rapid SOS, and it tells us a lat and long, or sometimes even an address of where your cell phone is calling from. But that technology is not perfect. So we don't rely on it. We use it as a tool if we have to, but the best thing is for you to be able to tell us where you're at. Again, this might feel like it takes forever. It doesn't. It's quick. Just answer our questions. And once we determine where you are, we'll proceed from there. So then we'll start asking, what is your emergency? And again, we need you to be quick and clear and concise. If you start telling us your life story at this point and it sounds something like, well, 3 weeks ago, I saw a guy in a red t-shirt, well, we're going to stop you. We're going to cut you off and we're going to take control of the call again, and we're going to get the information that we need. Okay. Sometimes that sounds like it can be a little rude. We're not being rude. We have a job to do and we need information. So we're going to take control of the call. From there, depending on the situation, we're going to ask you different questions and get the information that we need, and then we're going to dispatch the officers. So sometimes, like I said, it feels like it takes a lifetime. It doesn't. Start to finish, if you cooperate with all the questions, it's usually about 3 minutes. You will always be asked, is there weapons and are drugs and alcohol involved? It might seem weird that we're asking these questions, but it's officer safety. So we will always ask that.
So if you ask drugs and alcohol involved, when you say it's for officer safety, having been on the other side of that, I know, but what is important about, I mean, weapons for sure I get, but what's important about knowing if there are any drugs and alcohol involved in the incident that's ongoing?
Drugs and alcohol change how people react. They change how it just modifies people's behavior. So it's important for us to know if we're walking into a situation where there are definitely drugs and alcohol involved, especially drugs these days, the officers need to know so they can respond accordingly. And sometimes that also means they're going to need medical intervention as well. So it's important to answer that question. Like I said, especially when it comes to realtor safety, odds are they're going to be with a client at a showing. Drugs and alcohol are probably not going to be an issue, but we ask anyway. Same with weapons, always. It's an officer safety thing. And some of our questions will seem odd. There's a reason we ask them.
That's fair. I know I always said when I was policing that you'd need to know that. And I would much rather come into a situation, an emergency, and deal with somebody who maybe perhaps had smoked some marijuana versus somebody who had taken cocaine or had drunk a big bottle of whiskey. Like the behaviors of those people taking the different substances is drastic. Like the difference is drastic between them.
And I guess too, if an agent goes to a showing, I mean, it's not beyond the realm of possibility that there's somebody camped out in that yard if it's a vacant house or they've broken into the house or whatever. So I mean, it could definitely happen. But again, this is for the broader 911 experience, and those questions will always be asked.
So everybody's on the police, fire, ambulance, whoever is on the way to help. You've got the answers to the questions you need. You know where they are. Should the person stay on the line with you until police arrive?
That's going to depend on the situation. If we need them to stay on the line, say it's a dynamic situation, they're following an impaired driver. We need them to stay on the line in that case because there are eyes, or it's a crime in progress, or anything like that. A dynamic situation where the more we know, the better it's going to be for the officers responding. So we will ask them to stay on the line. If you are asked to stay on the line, please do so unless it is not safe. And if it's not safe, just tell us it's not safe and we'll figure something else out. Also be aware for dynamic situations like that, even though we might not have said the words police are on their way, the second we know where you are and a little bit of the circumstances, so we ask where you are, we've determined that, and the next words out of your mouth is, I'm watching a guy get beat up, or there's a fight in progress. The second we hear those words, we have communicated with our partners to get the police headed there because people's lives are in danger. In smaller centers where I'm working now, we can do what's called a hot dispatch, and you'll never know we're doing it. So the caller's coming through my ear on my headset. The second I touch the pedal to open the channel for the police officer, it mutes my mic. The caller can't hear me speaking, but the police officers can. So even though we haven't specifically said we've got police on the way, if they need to be on the way immediately, trust that they are. We'll often tell you that because it makes you feel better. And the caller isn't left wondering like why, 5 minutes have passed and what is going on. But sometimes we don't because the conversation doesn't allow for it for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had an agent I taught recently, and she said that she had to wait. This is a few years ago. Had to wait 3 hours for police to arrive. And during the time while she was waiting, she was trapped in a bathroom, and there was a client that she didn't know, this stranger client that wasn't actually a client, but he was an offender, and trying to get to her, and she had to wait 3 hours. Now, in our area, I mean, where you are now up north, like, I mean, even then, the distance between where the police are and where they need to go can be really, really great. For example, we service the Skeety area. So if we're on the Skeety and I have a friend that had a bunch of listings over there and there's an emergency, if you can get cell service, which we'll talk about in a minute about the SOS functions, then she could have to wait for police to get to the boat, get across, get a quad or whatever to get to them, and it can be quite a significant amount of time. In a situation like that, if possible, what would you recommend somebody do, or would you be able to stay on the line with them for that kind of period of time?
Absolutely. In a situation like that, and I've dealt with that, I used to dispatch out of the islands, so we dealt with the outer Gulf Islands. Here in the north, police presence is not always readily available for you. So I would stay on the line, absolutely. And I am going to do my best to keep that person safe. I'm going to give them some ideas of what they can do. For example, you said she was locked in a bathroom. That's fantastic. Is there anything in that bathroom that can barricade that door? Is there a window in the bathroom that you can escape from? Is there anything in that bathroom you can use to protect yourself if it comes down to that? I need you to get in the bathtub, lay flat down just in case there's a firearm involved. Anything that can help them. And I'm going to do my best to keep them calm during that entire time as well. I can hear what's going on in the background and I'm relating that to my officers. Okay, I heard Buddy, he's screaming now. Sounds like maybe he's under an influence. Okay, I can hear that he's talking about a weapon, or it's suddenly very, very quiet in the background. Maybe he's left or anything like that. So, yeah, I'm going to stay on the line with that caller and they're going to give me as much information as they can. I'm going to do my best to keep them calm. The more information I can get, the better for the officer's safety. So yeah, we're short staffed a lot of places, but that doesn't matter because that moment in time, that caller is the only person that I am dealing with that is important at that time.
Yeah, that's great, and that's great for people to know, especially when they are isolated out in a rural property, or just there's a parade and there's a blockade and you can't get through the
Yeah.
cars and the officers are trying, and it's, because all these things, nothing is ever perfect in an emergency. Like you said earlier, everything seems, even though it's in 30 seconds, it seems about like 6 minutes, or
Yes.
time
Yeah.
seems greater. So okay, and I used to deal with this back in the early days when somebody would call 911 by accident and hang up, or the kid would be playing with the phone and hang up, and we would still have to go, depending on the situation, to make sure that it wasn't like somebody was in trouble. They only managed to get to 911 before the would-be attacker came in, found the phone and grabbed it and hung up. So it's still an
Yeah.
emergency. We just don't have any information. So if somebody calls, in this situation, if they call 911 by accident, there's no emergency, they call by accident, they hear the 911, oh, oops, what should they do? Should they hang up, or should they stay on the line?
No.
What should they do?
Yeah. So if you call by accident, please stay on the line. If you hang up, we still have to deal with it. We'll phone you back. We'll track you down somehow, and it takes a lot of time. Stay on the line. Let us know it was a mistake dial, and we're going to ask you, is there anybody there keeping you from answering these questions? And if you say no, and we're confident with that, we're going to get a little bit of information from you. We're going to get where you are, because a file still has to be created. In every area that I've worked, and I'm sure this is the same across Canada, every 911 call generates a file, whether it's a mistake call, a pocket dial, a legit call, whatever. And an officer will follow up. So even if it's an accidental dial, stay on the line, answer the questions. We'll let you know. An officer's probably going to phone and follow up with you, and they're going to ask you the same questions, answer them again, and it's all over and done with. If you hang up, like you've dialed 911 by accident for whatever reason, and you're like, whoops, and you hang up before we get the call, remember I said that these calls go into a central dispatch. Their default is police. So any hang-ups, any calls that they can interpret, anything like that automatically goes to police. So again, we're going to get the call. It comes in as a hang-up. We're going to take the call display number, the lat and long that we might get, whatever information, we're going to call you back a whole bunch of times. If we can't reach you, a file is created and a police officer is dispatched as if it is a legit emergency. Apple Watches, I believe, and Apple phones, they have a fall detect, and we don't get those much up here, but down south, they're definitely a thing. Again, if it's not a legit emergency, just stay on the line. It takes a few minutes. We'll deal with it. You haven't done anything wrong. You're not going to be in any kind of trouble. We have to follow up on these. We can't just leave them. And also, it's important to note, even a phone that is deactivated will still phone 911. So if you've got an old cell phone that you give to your child to play with, and they somehow manage to hit the combination of those numbers, it is going to come through to us. The unfortunate part is a phone that's deactivated, we don't get the phone number. We rarely can get a lat long. A file is still created. It causes a lot of problems. It takes a lot of time. So if you have got a cell phone that you give a child to play with, you need to completely deactivate it, remove the SIM card, all of that. I'm not techie enough to know what you have to do but I'm sure that there's lots of people out there that can figure it out. But just so you're aware that even a phone that's no longer connected to a network will still dial 911. So we get them all the time.
Yeah, I bet. And that is common with littles that have these old phones. I know I have
Hmm.
a box of old phones that I've given my kids over the
Yeah.
years. Um, so yeah, and I just wanted to just sort of follow up with what you said on, and with people that are listening, not to waste, like, stay on the line. You're not in trouble. It might be a little bit embarrassing if you call 911 by accident, but the time and energy and resources, let alone the dispatch time, the police investigative time to figure out where you are, what's going on, to drive to your house or location to verify that everything is okay, when the police or whatever emergency services could be doing something else to help somebody else, or investigating an ongoing emergency. There's no reason not just to stay on the line for that
Yeah.
30 seconds, verify that everything's okay, that it was a pocket dial or whatever. Yeah, that's a really important one to remember, because those resources can be deployed elsewhere to help
Yeah,
somebody in an
absolutely.
emergency. Yeah.
Yeah. Just like if you phone 911 when it's not a legit emergency, you might get scolded, but you're not really in trouble. You're not, you'll just get educated on what an emergency really is and what it isn't. And that's it. And you go on with your life and there's no harm done.
And that's fair. So how do you, like, what do dispatchers feel about people programming like a 911 shortcut into their phone? What do you think? What are your thoughts on that? And I know that you guys as dispatchers probably talk about it.
We get it a lot because the second you put 911 into your phone, it comes through to us. So we ask people, please don't do that. 911, it's three numbers. It's everybody knows it, everybody remembers it. When you program it into your phone, it comes through to us. So that's a call that is not an emergency call. It's one of those hang up ones. And second of all, it makes it a lot easier to accidentally dial 911 if it's just one button on your phone. So please don't. Everybody knows 911. It's three numbers.
That's fair. That's totally fair. Um, so people have talked about using the side button on their cell phone. You can press it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, activates emergency SOS, and then it calls. I talk about this on the realtor safety course, and on this podcast, we're going to do an episode about little tips and tricks for emergency situations, like a really high risk situation. So some people can program, I mean, every phone is programmable now, where you can hit the side button 5 times and it activates your emergency contacts, and it also dials 911. Have you experienced anything like that?
No, I haven't up here, but I have heard that that is a thing. And I think it's a really valuable tool because I was going to go over what do you do when you can't speak freely
Mm-hmm.
and you need help. That is a brilliant thing where it's going to open that line. Again, it goes to that central dispatch or central call center. They're going to hear an open line. They're not going to be able to talk to anybody, so they're going to transfer it to police. We're going to get it. We're going to hear that open line. And until we can confirm whether or not it's an actual emergency, we treat it like an emergency. So you can't talk. The line is open. We're going to hear that in the background. And that's when we start with pinging the cell phone, getting the Latin long, running the number. We are doing everything we can in the background to find you and get you help. So if that feature is available to you and it's something that you feel would be useful, absolutely put it in your phone and use it if you need to, but leave that line open. Like if that's something, the situation is such that you can't speak, you've got your phone in your pocket, you hit the button 5 times, just leave it in your pocket, leave it open as long as you possibly can. We're going to find you and we're going to get help.
Yeah, that's great. We have talked about that because I know some people, have been in an emergency situation, and they've started to use this because it's more and more, this hitting your button 5 times fast is being talked about more and more. And I know people who have activated it by accident, and I also know people who have used it for an emergency. And that open line of communication, just so they can hear in the background, is really important. So
Yeah.
you mentioned something in there about pinging a cell phone. I know that I had asked dispatch a number of times in the past, ping this cell phone, this person's missing, or this, maybe before we hit an Amber Alert, there's a child with, a parent that shouldn't be. So when you talk about pinging a cell phone, how close can you get to the person's actual location? Or is it just, within a few meters, or is it very pinpoint?
It varies on the situation. So in a urban setting, it works so much better. We can get within meters. So when we do a ping, there's very specific criteria of when we can do this. So people need to understand that we're just not pinging phones willy-nilly here. This is in life or death emergency situations, or when we get a hang up and we can't determine whether somebody is safe or not. So there's very specific criteria. We have to fill out some paperwork to do it. It's not just an automatic. So we ping the cell phone. It gives us a lat and long, and it also gives us a radius of error. So that radius of error, if you took where the lat and long pings or plots on the map, the radius of error is the circle around that spot. Sometimes it is within meters, which is fantastic. Other times it can be kilometers. So if you're hiking up, I don't know, Mount Washington area, odds are that cell phone is going to be pinging off of the closest tower, which may be nowhere near where you are, which is why we can't always rely on it. So if we get a ping with a 5,000 meter radius of error, that's a huge distance, right? And just depending on how the technology works, sometimes you can be in the middle of a city and it still pings off of a bizarre tower somewhere else. So it's a useful tool, and we do use it when we have nothing else, but it's not always 100%. It can be very hit and miss. And there are still places all over this country where there is no cell coverage whatsoever. So the technology is good, but it's not perfect. And again, you see on TV, it plots to a perfect spot and zooms in and shows you the house. It doesn't work like that.
I know it's one of those things that I remember talking to people in ident, like the fingerprint people, the crime scene people that used to come to the crime scenes, and they were always up against the CSI shows and what they can't do, what they couldn't do. And I was like, it is not like on TV. The surveillance cameras don't see all these features,
No,
all the things that happen on the TV shows. It makes it harder for everybody in emergency services to do their job without this expectation. It's so funny.
definitely. So if you are using that service and you have an open line, give us everything you can give us as covertly as possible without putting yourself at any risk.
That's good. Yeah. Where there's no cell service, like I know on the ski there can be no cell service. Where there's no cell service, can 911 or SOS, or can that still be activated?
Sometimes. It's very rare. If there is no coverage, there is no coverage. Sometimes you can get a call out that will give, it ends up like a dropped call, and it'll give a lat and long, but if there's no service, there's no service, and that's just an unfortunate reality. That technology is changing from what I understand. There is going to be a very affordable satellite phone sort of feature on regular cell phones that will work anywhere. If your phone can see the sky, it's going to work. But that is not readily available, and it's not something that we can rely on yet. So if there's no cell phone coverage, there's no cell phone coverage. In that case, it sounds awful, but you're going to have to do everything you can until you can get to where there is coverage.
That's fair. I'm going to keep an eye on that satellite option, because it'll probably be a paid feature, an app of some sort or something on your phone, maybe with your provider. I'm going to keep an eye on that. That's interesting.
There are devices like a spot device. They're used very readily and widely up in the north here. It's a little handheld device. It's got an SOS feature. Those work everywhere. And it gives you a lat and long, and there are even some that you can do voice feature with. I don't know if that's something that real estate agents would want to invest in necessarily if they're doing a lot of very isolated areas maybe, but If you're an avid hiker, you're an avid kayaker, they're fantastic. They're not very expensive. It's a subscription service and they work awesome. And they are such a good tool if you go missing in the bush or on the ocean or wherever, and all you can do is hit that SOS, we're going to find you. They're fantastic.
Yeah, that's a good tip. So all this serious stuff, which is the most important thing, I think it's absolutely important aside. You said you've been dispatching for 23 years, which is a long time, but it's, you've probably seen and heard and experienced a ton of things.
Yeah.
Do you have any top stories that you want to share, something funny or scary or whatever that you think is appropriate to share?
Just for people that are using 911, just be aware that you will never shock us. We have heard it all. If you do shock us, we will tell you and congratulate you because we've heard a lot. We really don't dwell on the terrible calls a whole lot. Some of them are unfortunate. They do stick with you. It's the funny ones that we remember and that we enjoy so very much. Most of my funny calls that I remember involve alcohol, a lot of alcohol, and some involve neighbor complaints, which can be highly entertaining. I had a call once that the neighbor was upset because his neighbor's dirt was blowing on his lawn, his dust. Not a 911 call. We can't help you with that. Another one was a lady very, very upset that her neighbor's dogs were having sex on the front lawn, and she was just tired of watching it. After I determined the dogs were not in any physical danger, they were not needing intervention, I politely asked her to maybe stop watching it because that's creepy. I had a call from a gentleman in the back of a police car who somehow managed to hide his cell phone from the members and phone 911 saying he was being kidnapped. I could hear the radio. It was one of my calls. Anyway, after determining where he was, I just radioed the member and said, yeah, you might want to go to your car and take his cell phone away because he's phoning us. Lots of calls for people who have done things that they probably shouldn't have done and gotten in situations where they definitely need help. Couples doing a little experimenting with handcuffs and lose the key. That happens often, and they just have to suck it up and phone for somebody to come help them. We get lots like that. So there's a lot of funny calls. One of my favorite ones ever was on the island. A gentleman phoned in because he saw a tiger on the road.
Oh my.
And I said, I'm sorry, what? And he said, a tiger, a man-eater, and I said, sir, are you intoxicated? Yes, but it was a tiger. And there was. He wasn't wrong. It had escaped from an enclosure and was strolling down the middle of the road out in a rural area. And that was the most fun file to dispatch. And the whole situation, when the members pulled up, this individual was in the box of his truck with a dead chicken trying to call this giant cat. So he was placed in temporary custody for his own safety. And the owner of the cat went and retrieved the cat. It was her pet. And everybody was safe at the end. But if I could have a tape that I listened to over and over again, which we can't obviously, but that would be the one because that was the most fun ever. Because when I dispatched it, the members also went, sorry, a what? And I actually got to say tiger, T-I-double-ger, tiger. So that was good. But yeah, there's not a lot of bad calls that stick with us. It's the funny ones that we will remember forever. So if you call in with a good one, just know that you've made our day.
And you'll be sharing it, for years to come. That is so funny.
Yeah.
It probably was before everybody was recording everything on cell phones. Otherwise, there would be some video footage of the tiger.
Yeah. Yeah. The gentleman that called in, his sober wife was driving, and I did speak to her, and she confirmed his story. And so, yeah, anyway, when we found him, the owner had intercepted him before we had gotten there to speak to him and had actually given him the raw chicken. And like I said, he was in the back of his pickup truck calling anyway. So
It's
alcohol
crazy.
always makes for good stories. I mean, it can be a terrible, devastating thing as well, but most of the funniest stories are from people who have had a little bit too much to drink.
And I love that this guy has a bloody chicken and he's using himself. He's
Yeah,
essentially bait for this
yeah,
hungry tiger. Like what?
yeah,
What could go wrong for this wild predatory animal to then come
right?
up? And do you think he's just going to stop with the chicken? It's all over your hands. He might have a bite
I
of you.
know.
Oh my God,
He
that is.
was helping. He was helping.
Sometimes you just have to keep them busy just to keep them. Oh my gosh, that is so
Yeah,
funny. Yeah,
yeah,
I know some of the. I agree with you. Like having been in emergency response, you have to process and move on from the negative calls. And there's so much good out there that we have
yeah,
to do focus on that just for your own mental well-being. And because humor can be the best medicine and can, you know, keep us alive and keep us talking and laughing together and sharing those stories.
absolutely. Yeah.
I had lots of animal calls when I worked up north and moving escaped horses and all sorts of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, we had a member one time wanting, and I don't know if you were working at that time. I won't say his name. We can talk later. Some cattle had escaped. They were on a highway, a busy road in Nanaimo, and he wanted to taser one of the cows, a steer, like a 2,000-pound animal. He had no idea what was about to happen if he tried to do that. However, the sergeant on duty at the time, who was an old farm boy, and I can picture him leaping across his desk. And again, I wish cell phones were a big thing then because I would have paid to see this event unfolding. But the member said, "Permission to taser the cow." And the sergeant, all you heard was him hitting the base station and yelling, "No!" Anyway, it would have been fantastic. I asked him after it was all said and done, "What was your plan after you tasered the cow?" And he said, "Well, I was going to tie it to the bumper." No, no. But I
You
mean,
would have had
that's not a
one wild
911
animal.
call.
Yeah. Oh
Exactly.
my God. You would have
That's
been
not
dealing
a
with
nine-one-one.
a wild animal on your hands that's now all amped up with
Yeah,
supercharge. Oh my
yeah,
God.
yeah. It would have been fantastic. It wasn't a 911. It was a dispatch thing, but it would have been a 911 had he done that because somebody would have phoned in saying, "There's a police officer tied to a cow and a bumper bouncing down the highway. I think
That's
you need to come."
right. Oh my God. Oh, that's it's those types of things like you can't make it up. You can't there's
No,
no fiction that you can make up. That all the things that you come across. That's so funny.
yeah.
So I
So
won't give
as I
you
said, oh, sorry.
go ahead.
When in doubt, phone. If it's not an emergency, we will tell you it's not an emergency. You will not shock us. We are the original we listen and don't judge people because we don't. We know you're having a bad day. It's the worst day possibly of your life. We're here to help you. So yeah, when in doubt, phone.
That's great. And I share that message with people I teach and on the podcast that if, if you feel that you need to call because that's their job. And if it's not the right place for your complaint, then they'll tell you and move on and you can then
Yeah.
assess and go on about. So that's really great. That's really great advice. Um, before we go, I know I've taken up a lot of your time. Before we go, is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you think is important for? I mean, this podcast is for realers. Anything that you said today can be used for anybody in life. But is there anything else that you think of that we didn't talk about that you think is important for the listener to know?
Um, yeah, just people often don't know what agency they need, and that's okay. Just say you don't know or you need all of them. Let the person on the phone figure out which one is priority, and usually it's going to be ambulance because people overall. Um, just a quick thing on the if you can't speak freely or whatever, please don't phone and order a pizza. I don't know why that became a thing on the internet. That is not a thing in Canada. We are not trained to understand that certain words mean certain things. No, if you can't speak freely and you need to pretend you're speaking to somebody else, that's fine. And we're going to figure out ways to communicate. We're going to ask closed ended yes or no questions, all of that. But if you phone and you order a pizza thinking that emergency services are going to show up at your door because you're in trouble, it's not going to work that way. So please, please don't do that. And just be as patient and polite as you can with us. We know you're stressed. We know you're scared. We're going to be very professional and not sound a lot of really empathetic or sympathetic, but understand that we do care. We are doing what we do to help you. Please don't swear at us. Please don't threaten us. At the end of the day, we are human. That sticks with us. We're going to help you the best we can. Even if you do swear at us, we're still going to help you, but it's a lot nicer if you don't.
That is fair. And I think that everybody should pay attention to that, because in times of stress and our emotions getting going, we can act in a different way than we would have normally. So that's right. They're there for you. That's why they're there. They're there for you, to help you. So be kind, be
Yes.
nice, and they are going to help you. Just give them the opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Okay. Thank you so much for joining me today, Miss Carolyn.
Thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Good. That's good. Before we recap today's episode, if you have a story or a tip to share, please reach out to me via email or social media. Your experience could help someone else and might even be featured on an upcoming episode. Links are below in the show notes. Please leave a rating and review so that others can find me and learn ways to keep themselves safer. Share this with 3 friends. Better yet, please play this at your next office meeting with your agents. And the more people that hear this, the more people that will be safer in the long run. So a quick recap of today's episode was our conversation with the lovely Carolyn, a 911 dispatcher of 23 years. She imparted so much wisdom. Some things, I policed for 18 years, and some things today I learned I didn't know before. I learned that when you can't speak, you leave your mic open on your phone, and the dispatchers will be able to gather information to help keep you safe. I knew that what happens in the movies isn't always what happens in real life. However, there are a few more things that I learned today that makes it a little bit harder. I thought we would pinpoint our location exactly. So something new for everybody today. What is a life and death emergency? And what to do when you're calling? Stay patient, stay calm, be kind to them. They are there to help you. And it may be the worst day of your life, but they are going to do their very best. And I haven't met a dispatcher in my life that hasn't actually carried it on their heart to help people. That's what they do. That's what they want to do. So do your best to explain the situation, answer their questions, stay calm, stay kind, and they are on the way to help you, and they will stay with you. So never hesitate. If you don't know if it's an emergency, it's okay to call. Most police services have a non-emergency line, so don't hesitate to use that as well. But if you feel that it is a life and death or very serious emergency or panic situation, call 911. If it's not the right place for you, they will tell you. You will not be in trouble. If you hang up and call 911 by accident, call back and let them know there's no emergency. Let's save our police resources, our fire, our ambulance resources, our first emergency resources for those who actually need it. I hope none of you ever have to call 911, and hopefully you won't, but hopefully you did learn something today, and something just that will keep you a little bit more safe. And I can't wait to talk to you again soon.